Good morning, welcome to the shed. So if you've seen a few of my videos, you'll know by now that I am desperately in need of a bench. I can't really do any proper woodworking, chiselling or sawing or anything like that because I don't have a steady surface. All I use is my table saw or this bench, which I mistakenly put on casters. I need to take those off, which wobbles about all over the place. I haven't got a woodworking vise and I haven't got a woodworking bench. So I'm going to address that problem. Now, what I'm going to do is build one. I've looked at a few designs. I think really the one I want to build is the Paul Sellers bench. If you haven't seen Paul Sellers, I'll link to him down below. Proper old school woodworker. Yeah, now his one is made from proper wood as opposed to plywood, although he does do a plywood one. Yeah, so one of the tools I'm going to need to do that is something called a scrub plane. So what is a scrub plane and why do I need one? Okay, scrub plane does what it says on the tin. It scrubs out wood. So you've got your smoothing plane, which obviously is good for making nice smooth flat surfaces, will level out surfaces and that sort of thing, but it doesn't take out a lot of wood on each pass. So if you need to take out a lot of wood, and I do, and I'll explain why in a moment, then you need something called a scrub plane. A scrub plane is basically a normal plane, flat sole, but with a certain amount of curvature to the bottom of the blade so that it can scoop out wood. Now the reason I need this is part of the bench build involves laminating some 2x4s together. So basically it uses cheap wood from stud work, partition walling, uses those 2x4 studs. You glue them all together and you get a nice big heavy slab of wood. Problem with that is if you've seen any of those stud work bits of wood from the local DIY store, you know they're all over the shop. So although you can straighten them out a bit as you clamp them together, you're going to have some unevenness. Now you could take that off with a standard flat sole plane, number 4 or something like that, smoothing plane, but that's not going to be easy. It's going to take a long time. So what you use is a scrub plane, which as I say is a curved blade. I'll show you this one. This I haven't made it yet, by the way. So this is your standard smoothing plane. The blade's nice and level with the sole of the plane, but with a scrub plane, what you do is you curve that blade here so that it has a proud center part, and that is used to dig out or scrub out the wood. So basically it's for removing large amounts of wood quickly and easily. So you could go and buy yourself a sort of scrub plane ready to go, but there doesn't seem a lot of point. Basically it doesn't need to be accurate. You can use any old plane to do it. It's just basically going to scoop out lots of wood in one go. So I bought this. This is a record number 4. I think I showed it to you in my market purchases. I will link to that here. A few weeks ago I paid £5 for it. I've cleaned it up. It's now a usable plane actually, although I haven't done the blade because I knew I was going to be doing this scrub plane with it. So we're going to take the blade out of that, curve it, stick it back in and give it a test. The other thing you do is open up the throat slightly here because of the amount of wood that you're trying to shift. You don't have to do that. So if you wanted to, you take your standard smoothing plane that you use. If you haven't got a spare one, get a new blade, which is probably going to cost you as much as a new plane or another plane, and swap the blades between the two. But then you have to keep setting it up each time. So I think it's better to make one just for the job. As I say, I paid £5 for this on the market. It's pretty much ready to go. All I've got to do is change the blade. I have got a spare blade as well, just in case I cock this one up. Okay. So if you can imagine, these are my laminated boards. So I've got 8 2x4s laminated together. There's going to be some undulation both vertically and horizontally on those on that board bench top. Yeah, so basically using the plane, look at my lovely diagram. I didn't draw that by hand. internet, I can do diagonal cuts to smooth out across the boards, or I can do vertical. I'm saying vertical, it isn't really vertical, is it? So let's take the blade out of this. Here's the current blade. Yeah, it needs a good sharpen, but it doesn't matter anyway because we're going to grind a curve across here. So it does mean that the chip breaker becomes not really much use because it's only going to be in part of the blade, but we leave that alone anyway, we don't touch that. Yeah, so we put a radius across here. I think about 7 inches seems to be the standard. I've got a grinding wheel, so we're going to go over there in a minute and see if we can do that. And a 30-degree edge on here. Sharpening isn't going to be easy, but it doesn't have to be super duper sharp because you are really just scrubbing out wood. Okay, I've got a saucepan lid with a radius of, well, 6.5 inches. Let's try that, see if that'll do it. Not going to be easy to see this. I should use a set of compasses, but I haven't got one of those, so line it up straight. Trusty Sharpie. I don't think it needs to be any shallower than that. That looks about right. I think you should be able to see that okay. Let's get over to the grinding wheel and give it a go. I'm going to try and set it up so that I keep the 30-degree angle, but if not, I can put that on afterwards. Okay, got a fairly even curve across that. Hopefully my angle's less than 45 degrees, should be okay. But I don't think it's as shallow as 30. I might better just check that before I carry on and sharpen it at the wrong angle. Yeah, I was a bit worried it was getting a bit hot, so I kept dipping it. I don't know if you saw that. It did go slightly blue at one point, which I've now taken that bit off. Hopefully I haven't ruined the steel. I think we'll be okay. Okay, let's get, I'll just check that angle, then we'll get the sharpening stones out and see if we can get it sharp. Yeah, as suspected, it was slightly too steep, the angle, so I've just been back. The angle gauge on the grinder had slipped slightly, so I've been back and put a little bit more on it. Okay, sharpening time. Okay. So there's a bit of a burr on the back of that, which we can take off. Now allegedly I don't need to make these quite as sharp as a standard plane. I hope that's correct, because I'm not very good at manual sharpening. I'm just doing little circles all across the blade to try and get it started. Yep. Okay, got a pretty good sharp edge on that. I'm not sure it'll cut paper, but I think it'll cut wood. We can give it a go. Bit of a curve. My grinding accuracy is not 100%, but I think it's good enough. Okay, so that went quite well. Wasn't too bad, didn't take too long. I'm going to put it back together now and see if we can test it. Now obviously one of the problems I've got is that without a bench it's very difficult to test something that needs quite a lot of sort of downward pressure on it. But we'll give it a go. It's a bit like, how do you build a bench if you haven't got a bench? So the answer to that is you get yourself a Black & Decker workmate and use that to build your bench, which means you've got to buy a bench to build a bench. But anyway, I did actually have a Black & Decker workmate, but it was so knackered I chucked it away, and now I wished I'd kept it just to finish, just to do that project. But at the time I didn't know I was going to be doing that. Okay, so let's fit this blade. Still got the adjustability, of course, for the standard plane. Right, that is protruding a massive amount at the moment. Okay, so I've set that blade up. Can you see that? It is proud of the surface by, I don't know, a millimetre or two, but that's quite a big chunk of wood to take. But obviously it's only going to be taking wood out in the middle here. I think that'll work. I might need to give it a bit more of a sharpening, but we'll give it a go. Let's try and set up a test on my wonky old bench and see what happens. Oh, it's cold in here. We'll start with this bit of pine to get it set up. I think that needs to come a little bit more pronounced. It's not going to be easy because I just haven't got the sturdy bench, but the whole thing's moving, of course. I just tried to do this bit of laminated hardwood worktop, and it stopped working because the chip breaker had actually shifted against the blade, so I'd obviously not got it tight enough, so I just got to rebuild it. There you go. Should be okay now. Let's try on this bit of oak. I'm not having a lot of luck with the hardwoods because it's shifting too much. So on the pine it works really well. I still need to just open up that throat, which I've realised I've forgotten to do. But I struggled a bit on the hardwoods, mainly because my bench is moving all over the show and my technique is not brilliant. But I'll just show you on the plywood, the pine. If you get it set up right, it's actually quite easy. There's a bit of a knot in the middle of that. I'm shifting big, I don't know, 1/2 mil shavings there every time. Okay, so let's just open up that throat and try again on the hardwood, but it might be just my technique that's not quite right. Okay, we're going to take some off the front of the throat. My file only just fits in there, so I'm going to have to do very small strokes at first until I've got it down to a bit more open. There we go. Okay, I've opened that up by about, I don't know, about a millimetre. Let's try that. So with the throat opened up, a few big knots in here. Well, it's definitely sharp enough. Pretty good. Okay, so you get the general idea. It does work. how desperately do I need a decent bench? That has to be my #1 priority. So I'm going to start planning for that as soon as. I'm going to have to invest some money and buy the wood. It's actually not that expensive. It's more the labour that's needed. It worked. It struggled on the big bits of wood, but everything was moving. My technique's not great. I think it's important to get this set to the right depth for your piece of wood. So on the pine, it whizzed through there fairly easily. On the oak and the hardwood, it struggled a little bit, but my blade's still there. Got a little bit of, I guess the chip breaker doesn't really work very well once you've got the curve on the blade. Don't forget, if you do go and buy one of these, you don't need a Stanley. This is a Record, which is a Stanley, a British-made Stanley. British mades are better than the Stanley, obviously, but you don't need to spend a lot of money on it. Even a cheap Indian copy would be fine, as long as it's got a sturdy handle, and and this is well anchored because you're putting quite a lot of power through it. So there you go. That's today's top tip. So all in all, pretty happy. Made myself a nice little tool for a £5. Half an hour to clean it up. I didn't bother varnishing the handles on this one because I knew what I was going to be using it for. But actually, I've got a nice little plane. I only used the one blade. I could use I could swap the other blade back in there. That's it. Go out, buy yourself a plane, make yourself a scrub plane. You do really need a grinder. I suppose you could do it with a file, but that might be a bit hard work. But it's not impossible. All right, thanks very much for watching. See you soon.